It began not with a scream, but with a scent carried on the dry New Mexico wind of faint, sickly sweetness that the coyotes couldn't leave alone. It was February 2009, on the sprawling, dusty expanse of the West Mesa, a patchwork of creosote and sand on the outskirts of Albuquerque. A woman was walking her dog when the animal began digging frantically near a new housing development. It wasn't chasing a rabbit. It unearthed a matted clump of hair attached to a piece of human skull. That first grim discovery was a key turning in a lock no one knew existed, opening a door to a horror that would shatter the city's sense of safety and expose the hunting ground of a predator so prolific he would be dubbed a West Mesa bone collector. To understand the magnitude of the crime, you first have to meet the victims, not as statistics, but as the vibrant, complicated women they were. They were daughters, sisters, mothers, and friends, many living on the fringes of society. There was Victoria Chavez, a 26-year-old, whose smile could light up a room, but whose life was shadowed by addiction. There was Selenia Edwards, husky and see a child who dreamed of a better future. Michelle Valdez, 22, was a mother whose family described her as fiercely loving. Jamie Barella, 22, was remembered for her sharp wit and protective nature. These women, and 7 others, shared 2 tragic commonalities. They were all struggling, and they all vanished from Central Avenue between 2001 and 2005, a stretch of road known for its desperation and danger. Their disappearances were too often met with a shrug, filed away as the predictable outcomes of a high-risk lifestyle. The system failed to see the pattern, failed to see that a hunter was methodically culling them from the herd. The investigation that followed the grisly discovery was a monumental undertaking, a grim archaeology under the relentless desert sun. Police and forensic teams descended on the West Mesa, a place suddenly transformed from empty scrubland into the largest crime scene in New Mexico's history. They marked the earth with a grid of red flags, each one a silent testament to a fragment of a life. The scale of the burial ground was staggering. One by one, the skeletons were carefully 11 women in total. They had been discarded in shallow graves, their bodies arranged side by side, some stacked atop others, as if they were mere inventory. The sheer numbers spoke of an arrogance, a belief that this vast, empty landscape would swallow the evidence forever. The cause of death was elusive, the desert having done its work on the remains, but the manner of their disposal was a message in itself. This was the work of one man, a man with a need to collect, to control, and to hide. As the public reeled from the news, the task force began the painstaking work of connecting the victims to their killer. The list of persons of interest was long and shadowy. There was Lorenzo Montoya, a violent sex offender known to frequent the area, who became an early focus. Then there was Joseph Blee, a convicted rapist whose DNA would later link him to other unsolved murders. But the most compelling, and ultimately tragic, figure to emerge was a construction worker named Lorenzo Montoya. No, not the first one, a different man with the same name. This Lorenzo Montoya had worked on the West Mesa housing development. He knew the terrain intimately. He had a history of violence against women. And, most chillingly, he had reportedly told his girlfriend, "They're never going to find those bodies." The pressure of the investigation closed in on him like a vice. Before he could be formally charged or fully cleared, the weight became too much. In 2006, 3 years before the bodies were found, Lorenzo Montoya died by suicide. The police had questioned him in connection with the disappearances, and it seems he carried the secret to his grave. The case seemed to hit a wall. With their prime suspect dead, the investigation stalled. The families of the victims were left in a torturous limbo, denied both justice and answers. For years, the West Mesa murders became Albuquerque's open wound, a cold case that haunted the city. Then, a break came from an unexpected direction. A federal task force, investigating a different web of violence, began focusing on a man named Scott Lee Kimball. Kimball was a conman, a smooth talker, who had been a Federal Bureau of Investigation's informant. He was already serving a 70-year sentence for the murders of 4 people in Colorado. He was a chameleon, a man who used his charm as a weapon. Investigators discovered he had been living in Albuquerque during the exact time frame the women vanished. He fit the profile of a serial killer perfectly, a manipulative, nomadic predator who viewed human beings as disposable. Witnesses came forward, placing him with some of the victims. The evidence was circumstantial, a tapestry of timelines and tenuous connections, but it was enough to make him the new and final prime suspect. The climax of this decades-long nightmare wasn't played out in a courtroom with a dramatic verdict, but in a series of quiet, tense negotiations. In 2023, prosecutors, armed with their circumstantial case against Kimball, offered him a deal. He would confess to the murders of the 11 West Mesa women, and in exchange, he would avoid the death penalty, receiving instead 11 consecutive life sentences. It was a deal born of pragmatism, an attempt to bring a form of closure to the grieving families. The families were presented with this painful compromise. Some raged against it, wanting a trial, wanting the world to see the evidence and hear the details. Others, exhausted by the 14-year wait, simply wanted the confirmation, the admission of guilt that would finally allow them to lay their loved ones to rest in their minds, if not in their hearts. The case had twisted and turned for so long, and this was the final shocking revelation. That justice, in the end, would not be a thunderous declaration from a jury, but a whispered confession in a prison cell, a bargain with a monster to silence the ghosts of the Mesa. The deal was accepted. Scott Lee Kimball, already a convicted killer, now officially carries the weight of 11 more lives on his soul. The desert on the West Mesa is quiet again, the wind sweeping over the memorial that now stands where the graves were found. 11 granite plaques, each bearing a name, face the vast, empty sky. The investigation remains technically open, as Kimball has never formally confessed, leaving a sliver of doubt, a final, unsettling echo. The bone collector was never a phantom. He was a man who walked among the vulnerable, hidden in plain sight, his crimes buried by the assumption that some lives are disposable. He proved that the most terrifying monsters are not the ones who lurk in the shadows, but the ones who offer a helping hand, right before they lead you into the endless, waiting dark. If stories like this keep you hooked, hit subscribe for more.